Why do the most successful owners, breeders, and horsemen select the Green Group as their tax advisor? We simply save them money and know how to make them more successful. Over the past 40 years, founder Leonard Green has owned and bred some of the best racehorses in the history of the sport. His in-depth, hands-on industry knowledge, combined with cutting-edge tax-saving strategies, has produced positive results for his clientele and has made the Green Group the top-rated accounting and tax firm in the business. For a confidential and complimentary consultation, contact us at 732-634-5100 or visit our website at www.greenco.com. The Green Group, proven strategies to save you taxes.
Airdrie Stud consists of more than 2,500 acres, primarily on Old Frankford Pike near Midway, Kentucky. This gently rolling, mineral-rich land provides a perfect natural base on which to raise young runners of exceptional quality. Over 215 stakes winners have been bred and raised at Airdrie, an honor roll that includes 24 Grade 1 winners. Airdrie stallions, top band of broodmares, excellent land, and a staff of dedicated, experienced horsemen combine to assure a bright future indeed.
And they're off. And Shadow excellently down toward the inside.
And the favorite, Harlan's Holiday, is fourth.
Shanghai Bobby's taken back into second.
Justify and Mike Smith, the Kentucky Derby and Preakness winner, head up the backstretch in the Belmont Stakes. Authentic and John Velasquez have the lead.
What a spectacular return for Charlatan.
It is Jouster to win the Appalachian.
My name is Gary Falter with the Jockey Club. I'd like to welcome each of you to today's online panel of jockeys. This is the sixth panel in the 2021 series of 10 online Zoom panels. And this monthly virtual owner conference series, which continues through December, has been well received by owners with more than 1,100 owners registered. But I also want to make you aware that we recently announced that we're planning to host an in-person one-day conference during Breeders' Cup Week in Del Mar, California. We're looking forward to again offering new and existing and prospective thoroughbred owners additional education from many of our expert speakers and the invaluable face-to-face mingling and networking opportunities that have made the Thoroughbred Owner Conference such a popular event since we began in 2014. Plus, the attendees of the in-person conference will have the opportunity to purchase Breeders' Cup tickets with each registration. So to find out more about the in-person owner conference that takes place during Breeders' Cup Week, please visit our website at ownerview.com. Now, getting back to today, we have another outstanding group of jockeys here to share their experiences with you and answer some of your questions. So as the panel progresses and you have a question, please use the Q&A button at the bottom of your Zoom screen. The Owner Conference Series is hosted by the Jockey Club and the Thoroughbred Owners and Breeders Association. I'd also like to recognize our sponsors, starting with the presenting sponsors, Bessemer Trust, Dean Dorton Equine, Stone Street Farm, and Stoll Keenan Ogden. And today's panel is sponsored by the Green Group, Starlight Racing, and Airdrie Stud. And the support of all the sponsors make it possible to hold this event at no charge to you. Our sincere thank you to all the sponsors for their continued support of thoroughbred ownership. We hope you enjoyed today's panel, and we return next month when we have a panel that talks about racing clubs. Today's moderator is the now retired and famous NYRA race caller, Tom Durkin. Thank you, Tom, for being with us today, and please take it from here.
Unmute button, very key. We're coming to you from Saratoga Springs, New York. Also, about 4 blocks from me, Donna Brothers is joining us from her home on Union Avenue. Beautiful day here at the spa, and we expect beautiful weather all week long. Big week of racing. So my notes say a few words about yourself, Tom. I used to call horse races, and that'll be that. Now, let's have a few words about our panelist, Donna Barton Brothers. Donna, how are you? Donna is, well, I mean, she won over 1,100 races, all boatloads of stakes races. But when she stopped riding horses, she just kept on rolling. Outside of being the healthiest person I have ever met, she's a yoga instructor now. She's also, I think, the CEO, if that's the correct title, at Starlight Racing. And you probably know her best as a commentator on NBC, not only for racing, but she does dressage and bull riding and a number of stuff for NBC. So Donna, welcome to you.
Thank you.
And Gary Stevens. Gary, how are you, young man?
Doing well, Tom. Thank you. Finally got connected. It takes me a while.
That boy. 3 words to describe Gary Stevens, Hall of Fame. And we'll be seeing you this weekend for the induction ceremony. He's also an actor. You remember him from Seabiscuit and the television series Luck. He won 3 Kentucky Derbies, 10 Breeders' Cup races, and 5,000 races along the way. He comes from a horse racing family, much like Donna, whose mother was a jockey and his brother and sister was a jockey. Gary's dad was a trainer, I believe, and your brother, a jockey who only won 5,000 races, and your mom was a rodeo queen. So you got that horse blood coursing through your veins. And another fellow who comes from a racing family, at least his brother, Greg, was a very accomplished rider. Greg McCarron, 3 words for him, Hall of Fame. Won 3 Kentucky Derbies, 10 Breeders' Cups, 9, how many Breeders' Cups? 9 Santa Anita Derbies, 5,000 races. And again, his family just comes from a whole group of racing people, but it's pretty much just your brother and a family of, what was it, good Irish family there, Chris? 10? Unmute, please.
Are you talking about my siblings?
Yes, you got 10, including Greg, of course.
Yeah, no, there's 9 of us. There's 6 boys.
Oh. Okay, you're not, I got him stalled out, but there we go. But a good Irish family nonetheless. Anyway, so let's move on here. At the beginning, we're just going to throw stuff out for all of you guys, just to banter back and forth with each other, whatever, very informal. You know, this week with the Olympics and the big story, Simone Biles, and it really focused in on the intense dedication that you have to be a world-class athlete, not only the physical part, but there's a mental part as well. Could you guys talk to that about just about that general, then maybe you can even comment on Simone Biles, because it's such an important story in the sports world today. Go ahead.
Donna, go on.
Yeah, I had to unmute myself. Gosh, I don't really know where to start. I mean, it's definitely, a physical game. So I feel like there's 3 elements that make a really good jockey. Number 1, you have to be a really good horseman or a horsewoman. So you have to have that communication with horses. And number 2, you have to have the physical prowess. You have to be, certainly agile and athletic and strong and all those things. But the mental toughness might be the most important thing, because Gary and Chris and I have seen many, many jockeys who had those first 2 talents, but just never seemed to make it. And part of the reason why you have to have so much mental toughness is because you face way more rejection than you face acceptance. So you go to a lot of barns where the answer is no, we don't need you. And then also the most successful jockeys win about 20 to 25% of the time. So you get beat up on 75 to 80% of the time. And so to keep your head above water and your confidence high is challenging. But to be honest, I would rather hear from the two Hall of Fame jockeys who managed to do it long enough and well enough to get into the Hall of Fame. Gary.
Donna, I read a quote this morning from Miss Biles, and I think it's summed things up pretty simply. She won a medal yesterday on the balance beam. Good for her, and congratulations. But she said, we're not only entertainment, but we're humans. And the stress and day in and day out of riding at the highest level, expectations high from owners, trainers, and on ourselves. I think that one thing that all three of us can say in likeliness is we put more pressure on ourselves than any one person that we ever dealt with, whether it be family members or trainers, owners, like I said, to perform and not make mistakes. And that stress, we've seen friends that have mentally overloaded over the years. Sometimes you need to take that break as athletes. And I think the key thing that I read is we are entertainment. We're in the entertainment business. If at the end of the day you look and think about it, but the stress of day in, day out travel, being in New York, in Europe, California on a constant basis, and trying to be at the pinnacle, it does its fair share of mental weakening, and you can't afford to be mentally weak. It's a stress that we put on ourselves from a young age. And I won't continue on. So I think Chris McCarron can probably add to that as well. Chris.
Hey, yeah, thanks, Gary. Yeah, I saw an interview that Simone Biles did a few days before the competition started, and she kind of startled me a little bit. She said that, I'm going to move to another room so you don't hear that lawnmower in the background. She said that the gist of it was she's tired of getting hurt. She's tired of putting so much stress on her body that she wakes up every morning in considerable pain from everything that she puts her body through. And I can relate to that. I went for probably a couple of months of soul searching when it came time for me to decide when I was going to retire. Years ago, I used to think I was going to wake up one morning and say, you know what? Tell my wife, guess what? I'm not going to put those white pants on today. That's going to be it for me. But it didn't happen that way at all. It took me at least a couple of months to consider all my options. The answer was yes. Would I regret? Probably some. Would I? What would I want to do next? And I had a couple of options that came my way. And the bottom line is, I didn't want to get hurt anymore. I just didn't want to break any more bones. And it's Gary far outweighs the number of times that he and I were injured. He had more surgeries than I had, but I broke 10 bones, and that's enough for me. I had my fill, and the excitement that I experienced throughout the 28 years that I rode was just incredible.
Yeah, well, you picked up on that, Chris, and to all you guys, that's kind of like the hard part, that dedication, the mental toughness that you have to have. But there's got to be a reward. Chris just touched on it. And what's the most rewarding thing about being your jockey, looking over your career? What did you find was the most rewarding thing for each of you?
Money. No. No. For me, it would be the wonderful people I met along the way. My parents were not They were dead set against my brother Greg becoming a jockey because they didn't want him involved with gamblers and degenerates and derelicts. But after Greg and I got farther into our careers, they understood that we associated ourselves with some really wonderful people, and all the travel that we got to experience, going, who in the world, there's no way I would ever think that I'd ever go to a place like Dubai or Australia.
Or Brazil
England.
with my mother. Remember when you guys went to represent the Americans, when you went to Brazil, my mother was the female jockey and you were the male representative.
That was 1975. Yeah, that was in my second year of riding. Anyway, for me, it's the experiences and the people that I got to meet, all the traveling I got to do.
I would have to agree with, I'm sorry, Donna.
Go ahead,
no,
Gary.
you go ahead, Gary. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I'd have to agree with Chris myself. I basically received my education through world travel of what these great racehorses and great people that I was involved with from an early age. Traveling the world from Hong Kong to Japan to being based in France, being based in England, racing in Ireland. I mean, that in itself is my blessing of all the wonderful people, not only the wonderful people, but the great racehorses that I've ridden. And with social media right now, sometimes you forget all of the accomplishments, everything. And there's some things that have been popping up on Twitter that just spark a memory of, and I'm like, wow, that was so cool. And it's hard to explain, but that's the passion I think that all of us enjoy, and that spark and that feel of riding the big races. And it didn't matter. Sometimes you rode a $5,000 claimer that tried every time that went out there, and you got just as much satisfaction as riding one of the great horses, because you knew they were going to give you their all, and you became friends with that particular horse. And the relationships that we gain with the human side of it, as well as the equine side of it, you never forget one particular horse. We all rode so many horses through our career, and I'd be looking through the racing forums before we had all of the video technology that we have now, where you can just get on your phone and look up a race and boom, yeah, I remember this one. But a lot of times you wouldn't particularly remember a certain race just looking at the daily racing form or whatever you have to be looking at. And you get legged up on the horse, and you're walking to the racetrack, whether it's Saratoga, Del Mar, Santa Anita, Belmont, and that horse will make one movement, and you say, I remember you. And it might have been 2 years since you've sat on that particular horse, but all of a sudden that you remember everything about that particular horse, and you either get along with them or you don't. But I'll let Donna speak into that.
Yeah, Donna, your reward end of the deal.
Well, I'll be fast. So for me, Tom, as you alluded to earlier, I grew up in a horse racing family, but we raced at the lower levels. So my mother was the leading female jockey in the nation for pretty much all the years that she rode. But we raced at places like Waterford Park, which is now Mountaineer, Commodore Downs, which no longer exists, Thistle Downs. And so for me to be able to race at the highest level and to ride really, really good horses didn't just mean a lot to me, it meant a lot to my family. And so the very first time that I got to ride at Keeneland, for me, that alone was a gift. And then I won 3 races on opening day of the fall meet of 1993. And I was just blown away. And I went the next day and introduced myself to D. Wayne Lucas because I thought for sure he would want to meet me, right? So it took a while to get into his barn, but then to just be able to ride the amazing horses. I mean, I had ridden some horses I loved, as Gary talked about, that were $5,000 claimers. But when you have horses who have that much effort and an equal amount of talent, and you get to ride horses like Serena Song and Lord Carson and Lost Pan and Hennessy, and it was just truly a blessing. Truly a blessing.
You guys are physically fit beyond belief. I know over the years I've dated a lot of exercise riders, and any one of them could have won a bodybuilding competition. I mean, I just don't think that people realize the physique that you have to have. And now they didn't go to the gym. They didn't have to go to the gym. They just got on horses in the morning and wound up being incredibly physically fit. What was your regimen for physical fitness and health and nutrition, which is something, yes.
I'll talk about that first, because I think for me as a female, it was maybe a little harder because I started out at 98 pounds. So I didn't have to reduce like Chris and Gary had to. And so it took me about a week to realize I wasn't physically strong enough to compete on the same level with the guys that I wanted to win against. And so I got into the gym and I wasn't building muscle, because I learned when I started reading that a 22-year-old woman's body wants to build fat in case you have a baby, and a 22-year-old man's body will build muscle with a Twinkie. And so I had to change my diet completely to add a lot of protein, get rid of some carbs, and get my body into muscle building mode. But it took me a year of working. And this is, like you said, I had been galloping horses for a year and a half before I rode my first race. So I already had a pretty good foundation, but it took me a solid year of working out in the gym to get as strong as my male competitors were. But I think the challenge that people like Gary and Chris had is that they had to keep their strength up and their weight down, which I think can be even more challenging. Chris, Gary.
Yeah, that's right, Donna. I didn't have as bad a weight problem as some of my contemporaries, but I still had to watch my weight. I still had to watch what I eat, and so forth and so on. It's Gary and Donna will understand this. Whenever I went out to dinner, the first thing I thought of was the lightest weight on the overnight for the next day. What's the lightest I have to do? What's the lightest I have to tack?
I do the same thing, Chris, to tell you the truth. Yeah.
I noticed that, Tom. Yeah.
Yeah. I did not succeed at it very well, but
yeah, it was a struggle, and there were many times when I'm sitting in the hot box and have pulled 2 pounds of sweat, and thinking that I hope I'm going to be at my very best when I get out of the hot box. You can't just go ahead and have a couple of glasses of water after you get out of the hot box, because you're just putting right back on what you took off. So it took a serious disciplined mind to have to tolerate what sacrifices we had to make.
Yeah, Chris, I struggled with my weight, guys, from the time I started. There were people when I was young. I wanted to be a jockey. I wanted to be a football player. I didn't know what to do, and then I didn't grow. But I was a wrestler, and my problem.
Well, Chris wanted to be a hockey player.
Well, there you go. My worst problem is I couldn't go to the gym because I would start putting on muscle mass, and muscle is heavier than fat. And so I would get my weight down, but as Father Time started kicking around and my stints in Europe, and the weights that you carry are heavier, a little richer food, a little more red wine and stuff, not on a jockey's menu. And I got bigger towards the end of my career, and it became a massive struggle to, when I first came to California, I could tack 114, 115 pounds. By the end of my career, I was struggling to do 118, 119 pounds. And I would, I was in a system, a daily system is, if I didn't get into the sweat box for at least an hour, I didn't feel comfortable. I needed that. That was part of my program. Mentally and physically. And I would pull, 3-4 pounds of water weight, and I would pull extra weight so I could rehydrate myself with the best hydration that I could, where I felt like $1 million when I went out there. And it was a totally different way than I'd handled things earlier on in my career. But it's what worked for me. And, you know, every jockey that does have some weight issues, I know Mike Smith, he was very similar to what Donna was talking about at the beginning of his career. He was small and he worked hard to put on muscle mass, and he's done a heck of a job of doing it, because he's still his physique, everything about him. But I can honestly say I don't like walking in front of a mirror right now at age 58 near as much as I did when I was younger, Tom.
None of us do.
Donna, please, I'm begging you.
Right.
I weigh as much as all three of you combined. Don't talk to me about looking in a mirror, okay? Part of this deal of being a jockey is other people that you work with. You work with an owner and you work with a trainer. It's kind of a triangle. And we'll just throw this out to all of you. Explain the relationship dynamics about you and an owner, or you and a trainer. How often do you talk to an owner? Does the owner decide who's going to ride a horse? What are the dynamics of that triangle?
I'll jump
Donna,
in.
you can start.
Yeah, mostly it starts with your relationship with the trainer. And so when I started riding, I'll just say Dwayne Lucas, because he's a well-known trainer who had a lot of high-profile owners. But it started with he started letting me get on some horses here and there, and he saw that I was really good with 2-year-olds, and that I wasn't afraid of 2-year-olds. There's a lot of Hall of Fame riders who don't really want to be riding 2-year-olds for their first start. They'd rather get on them once they've proven that they have a little ability. And so I was able to get into his barn because I was good with 2-year-olds. I was good out of the starting gate. And I'd like to think I was a good rider too. But it started with that relationship with Wayne. And then at some point, there were times when he would come up against resistance from one of the owners. And I'll give you an example. When he was running 5 horses in the Derby one year, and I was working almost all the best horses, including Honor and Glory. And Michael Tabor, who's from Europe, wasn't comfortable having a female on his horse. Wayne wanted me to ride Honor and Glory. And a lot of the media wanted me to push against that. And my answer was, look, the guy puts a lot of money into the game. He can have a say in who rides his horse. If he doesn't want me on his horse, I don't want to ride it. Honor and Glory was ridden by Aaron Grider and ran last, so it was fine. I didn't miss anything in that particular mount. But for the most part, it's the relationship that the trainer and the jockey has, and the owners typically trust the trainer to make the decision about which jockey has the best rapport. But you're also going to have situations where owners just say, look, I've never been lucky with that guy. Or, I saw him ride a horrible race, 2 races in a row on Wednesday, and I don't think he's riding well right now. And sometimes the owners do have input. I didn't typically communicate with the owners and approach them and say, hey, you've got a horse I'd like to ride. But I think guys like Chris and Gary did do that, because especially once you get into the Hall of Fame, an owner likes to get a phone call from a Hall of Fame rider saying, hey, I'd really like to ride your horse. Gary, Chris, how much did you all utilize direct communication with the owners?
I didn't do that often, Donna. I let my agent handle that. I didn't feel comfortable doing that. I was very close, obviously, with the Coolmore folks, the lads, as you mentioned, Michael Tabor and all of them. I was kind of their go-to guy. Won their first classic for them here with Thunder Gulch in 1995, and that's a whole nother story, Thunder Gulch. But it's got Coolmore rolling, and they built.
Well, if that's a whole nother story, why don't you tell us, Gary? Go ahead.
Well, I walked out in the paddock. I was there for the Remsen to ride. It was a pickup mount, Thunder Gulch in the Remsen Stakes, which is the final kind of graded race at Aqueduct in the fall as a 3-year-old going 1.8 miles. And there's been a lot of good horses come out of the Remsen
for 2-year-olds. 2-year-olds.
For 2-year-olds, yes. excuse me, and it's a, you know, kind of a measuring stick for the Kentucky Derby. If you get a colt that can run 1, 2, 3 in the Remsen, prove that he can go the mile and an eighth as a 2-year-old, then that's something to look forward to. Anyway, I walked out in the paddock, and Todd Pletcher, who was the assistant to Wayne Lucas at the time, he walked out in the paddock and over to me, and he said, "Man, this is really important. We just bought this colt," and he kind of run average second the first time, and this be huge if he happens to win today. We've got these new owners. And I looked at this colt, and he was barely 15 hands, and I said, "What'd you pay for him?" And $650,000. I started laughing. I said, "You got to be kidding me." I said, he looks like a Shetland pony. And then they legged me up on his back, and he didn't feel like a Shetland pony. He was as white as he was tall, and he carried himself with a lot of authority. He was sort of a playboy. Anyway, long story short, he winds up winning the Derby a year later, and I won the Preakness on him. Mike Smith rode him in the fall, and that was Michael Tabor, John Magner, and the Coolmore boys. And what a way to get somebody hooked on American racing is to win the Kentucky Derby. So all these years later, we look and see not only what they've done in Europe, but for American racing, and it's pretty cool.
Yeah, Chris, your thoughts on that triangle of owner, trainer, jockey, and I guess it's probably a rectangle, not a triangle so much, because the agent is involved.
You just took the words right out of my mouth, because Gary mentioned the agent's responsibility to be communicating with the trainer and the owner. When in actuality, the agent, 99.9% of the time is communicating with the trainer. The trainer typically calls the shots. There are some exceptions to that, but a lot of trainers don't even like the agents to be talking to the owners, and worse yet, they don't like the jockeys having a lot of communication with the owners either, unless they're close friends. Unless they either were friends from before or acquired a friendship over time. But it's really the agent's responsibility to be communicating about where and when a horse is going to run, who's going to ride it, and so forth and so on. I actually got in trouble a couple of times calling an owner myself, trying to stay on a horse when my agent said the trainer is going to take me off a particular horse. I actually had the gall to get on the phone when I found out it was the owner that was making the decision. So I went right to the source, and the trainer didn't like that too much. There's another side of the coin though too. Let's see, what year was it? 89. In 1989, my agent had given a call on a horse called Me Selecto, trained by Gil Roundtree from Canada. Me Selecto just got beat ahead in the Meadowlands Cup with Jose Santos. And they wanted to make a change. They wanted to put me on the horse, and we gave them the call. Well, about a week later, Sunday Silence came open for the Breeders' Cup Classic that you called at Gulfstream, Tom. And when Sunday came open, the trainer said, Gil Roundtree said, "Well, you've already given me the call. If you want off this horse, you're going to have to call Frank Stronach, who owned him." And so my agent says to me, he said, "I think we'll have a better chance of getting off Me Selecto if you call Stronach rather than I call Stronach." I said, "What do I pay you 25% for?" Huh? So I actually did make the phone call, and Frank was only too kind to say, "Yes, that horse is going to be the favorite or second choice behind Easy Goer. You have my blessing." And so he let me off the horse. And I'm going to mute myself right now because the lawnmower in the background is probably driving you guys crazy.
We can't hear it. I can't.
Donna, I got a question for you.
Oh, that's good. I'm glad to hear that.
We
Thanks
can't
for
hear
letting
it,
me know.
Yeah. Donna, I'm going to ask you, and then Chris, if you can pick up on this next question. John, now this wasn't, well, before we get there, Can you explain, Donna, the business end of who gets what out of a purse? Your horse, you're an owner, you win a race. How much goes to the trainer? How much goes to the jockey? How much goes to the agent? It's all percentages.
Yeah, so let's just say $100,000 purse for nice round numbers. 60% is going to go to the winning connections, so to the owner. But from that 60%, 10% is going to go to the trainer, which the trainer will bill the owner for. And then 10% is going to come out of the horseman's bookkeeper's office straight to the jockey. So the jockey's going to get $6,000. So from that $6,000, you're going to pay your agent.
6,000 or it's 60,000
yes,
that you get for winning the race.
Right. The owner got
10%,
60,000.
yeah.
Right. That was the winner's share of the purse. And so I get 10% of that. So I get $6,000. Of that $6,000, 25 to 30% depends on the deal you have with your agent. Typically in racing, if an agent has one jockey, then they get 30%, but oftentimes agents will have two jockeys. And so the deal is sometimes then 25%. So you're going to pay your agent 25 to 30%, and you're going to pay your valet. And yes, we realize it's spelled valet in horse racing, but we pronounce it valet, rhymes with pallet. So you're going to pay your valet, unless you have a deal worked out with your valet, typically up to 10%. And so now you're down to, what was that about? Let's say you're 3,000. So you're at about, I guess, $4,000. You've gotten rid of about 2,000 of it so far. And then of course you pay taxes, right? And so after you win $100,000 race, you end up with netting about a little over $1,000 after you pay your agent, your valet, and taxes.
Oh dear. Well, that's the way of the world.
Yeah.
But Chris, back to you. The jockeys, they share a locker room, although you didn't really share a locker room with Donna. But jockeys share a locker room with their opponents. And that's got to be a supercharged environment after a race. I mean, you can imagine what it'd be like if two boxers after a boxing match shared a locker room. What's that like in there?
I'm going to move yet again because the lawnmower is directly in my backyard now. Yeah, it's without question, it is the most unique locker room atmosphere of any sport. You know, we rub elbows with each other when we're in the jocks room, and you know, we're going out there for very high stakes, lots of danger involved with regard to, you know, how fast the horses are going and in what close quarters they keep each other and the jockeys keep each other. So it's a very, the strange part of it is most of us are friends. At least we're friendly with each other. And when the bell rings, you know, it's every man for himself. I might go out there and shut Gary off really bad, cost him the race, and he gets all mad at me and everything. It doesn't last long. We might have dinner that night together. But it's a wonderful atmosphere because when I was riding in Maryland, the camaraderie in the jocks room was fantastic. And I thought I was going to miss out on that when I moved to the West Coast, going for the higher stakes, tougher riders, better horses, better trainers. But I found it to be incredibly comfortable, most notably because of a little guy named Mr. Bill Shoemaker. He really made you feel at home, and he was the dean of all the jockeys out there. And once you won shoe over, you're pretty much in a real comfortable position.
You, well, I'll get to that photo finish between you and Shoe in the Breeders' Cup Classic in just a second.
Oh, do you have to?
All right, I don't have to. But only because you lost by this much, but that's okay. You won it the next year with a horse named Ali Sheba. You rode Tis Now, John Henry, Sunday Silence. Those are just four. to name. But any insight into their personalities, not necessarily each one of those, but the personalities of some of those great horses and of champions in general?
Well, it's funny. Sunday Silence, Ali Sheba, and John Henry had several things in common. One of them was that they were very mean in the stall. Sunday Silence would tear your arm off if you try to go into his stall. His groom, Charles Clay, got along very, very well with him. Ali Sheba was the same way. Really domineering. You enter into his stall and you better be on your toes, because he acted like he didn't want you in there. So to get you to exit, he would try to hurt you. And John was the same way. He was a mean son of a gun in the stall, but once those horses,
even though he was a gelding, John Henry, even though he was a
gelding,
gelding, he still had that attitude?
Yeah, well, he was castrated as a yearling because he was so, maybe as a 2-year-old, early in his 2-year-old season, because he was so mean, dirty, rotten. But they carried that particular aggressive nature out onto the racetrack with them. And they fought really diligently to win races. And so that's the upside to a horse being really aggressive. If they carry that into their races with them, they become very successful.
Let's move over to Gary for a moment. Some of your greats, I mean, so many of them. But one race that I remember, although I didn't call it, but it was one of the most memorable thoroughbred races I ever saw. It was the Breeders' Cup Distaff between Beholder and Songbird. Songbird was undefeated going into that race. One of the most thrilling final 3 furlongs of any race I can remember, and you just did win with Beholder. How does it feel, I guess, winning those little head bobbers as opposed to winning by many?
It's funny you asked that. There were a lot of emotions going into that race. For those of you that don't know, my friendship with Mike Smith, he is my best friend. He's a brother to me. He's my third brother, if you will. And we hadn't talked a whole lot about the race. We didn't need to. We had talked about other races on the card. You talked about friendships, or Chris did, and we would actually bounce things off of each other's head if we weren't riding against each other. What do you think about this? What do you think about that? Well, obviously we didn't talk a whole. He knew every move I was going to make. I knew every move he was going to make. They weren't really chess matches because we knew each other so well. And he had all the confidence in the world. I had all the confidence in the world because I was riding for Richard Mandela, who had focused specifically the whole year on the Breeders' Cup Distaff. She never came into her own until about 3 weeks before the Breeders' Cup Distaff that year. We had a 7/8 of a mile workout with a mile gallop out that if Richard Mandela kicks his heels together and if I'm smiling when I get off their back, then we're in good shape. So we went into the race feeling that way, and I could tell by Mike's swagger that he was confident in Songbird, and I knew it was going to be a throwdown, and it did. It turned into one of the best horse races that I had ever ridden in, with the way the filly and the mare battled back and forth through the stretch. And I'll be honest with you, I tightened it up on. Mike was on the inside, I was on the outside, and I tightened it up on the filly at the 8th pull, and I said, let's see how much she likes this from the old mare, tightening it up. And Chris and Donna both can attest to, you ride certain horses that have that fight in them, like Chris was talking about with the Colts. Well, these fillies, she liked being in tight. When I tightened it up on her, she fought back, and I said, oh man, I wish I wouldn't have done that. And I switched my whip into my left hand, and I'd never hit Beholder in a race. when she was on her game. I didn't need to. She would give me all that she had. And anyway, when you get into those sort of battles, you just throw your soul to the wind and do anything and everything to contribute to that horse's athleticism. You become one with the horse, and you have one thing on your mind, and that's getting their nose down in front at the finish line. And when I say it was bittersweet, there didn't deserve to be a loser that day. And they had the, I obviously was ecstatic that we did get our nose down, and Donna was on the backstretch working for NBC that day, and she said, "Gary, are you sure you won? It's tight." And I said, "Well, I think I did." and then I started questioning myself, because I'd given a little bit of a celebration, just not overdoing it, I don't think, but I gave a little whip motion with the hand. And then I said, "Oh man, I hope I didn't screw this up." And then I was galloping back, and Jerry Bailey, their NBC set on the turn, he hollered congratulations. And so anyway, they had the champagne toast for the owners, Mr. Hughes and the whole Spendthrift crew, and Mr. Mandela. And I took a glass of champagne back to the jocks room and had a toast with Mike Smith. So it was epic. It was a great race, and I'm sorry there had to be a loser.
Yeah, when we're all done here, you guys can YouTube the 2016 Breeders' Cup Distaff. It was one of the great races of all time. I think
Tom, I can tell you, and the viewers, if they listen to the NBC call, and that might have been one of the first years you didn't call for us anymore for NBC, because you had just left the network by your own accord. And it was the one race I've heard Larry Coleman say he'd like to have back, because he said, as they hit about the 8th pole, he said, and the something about the battle has ensued, and the race has lived up to its expected. And he had himself backed into a corner, and the only word he could come up with was power. And so nobody else would have noticed that it wasn't a flawless call, because it really was a good call. But you announcers are as hard on yourselves as jockeys are, so you know exactly how he felt at that point.
Yeah, well, I get paid the same for good job or bad job. It's not it's not your guys' game. You don't win, you don't get paid. Donna, let's move to you for just a second. As I mentioned, your mother was a jockey. Your sister was a jockey, Leah. But there's not a lot of women jockeys. How come?
Oh, well, my mother was actually surprised by that, because she started riding in 1969. The first year they were licensed was in 1968, but really they didn't start. It was at the end of 68. And so she was one of the first half dozen women. And she said to me recently, I would have thought by now every other jockey would be a female, because you do see, females in more and more occupations in increasingly larger numbers. And you haven't seen that so much in horse racing. But one of the things I often point out is that the other thing that's changed since she started riding in 1969 is that the United States isn't an agrarian society anymore. So most kids don't grow up on a farm riding horses. And the kids who do grow up riding are often well-heeled, well-to-do kids whose parents can afford for them to have a nice horse at a riding stable. And if they want to be a jockey, great, but they're expected to go to college. And so typically the ones who end up getting deeper and deeper into that are the girls. And a lot of the boys just don't grow up riding horses. And so the other thing that you don't see is a lot of American born white boys growing up in the United States and becoming jockeys. Meanwhile, in many of the Latino countries, they grow up riding horses. So they've been riding since their earliest memories, maybe since before they could walk. And they've got some phenomenal jockey schools. Those kids graduate from the jockey school at about the stage one of our apprentices would be 6 months into his or her riding career. And so you're not only not seeing a lot of female jockeys come into the ranks right now, you're not seeing a lot of American-born male jockeys coming in. And the other thing that's changed, and I think Larry and Chris could attest to this too, is that we don't have the middle tracks as much as we used to. We have lower level and we have upper level, but it's harder to get that leap up. So you know, I mean, Gary, he started in Idaho, Iowa, right?
Idaho.
Thank
yes.
you, Donna. Close.
in Idaho. And then, you know, slowly made his way up by getting up to Northern California, and then finally came down to Southern California. Mike Smith started in Ruidoso and El Paso, and then, you know, went to Hot Springs. And so there were these nice middle racetracks where I don't feel like we have, you know, the tiers the steps aren't as easy to make as they used to be. That's my theory anyway.
Gentlemen, do you have any theories about the lack of I'm not gonna say the weaker gender at all, but the lack.
Tom,
of,
you don't live that far from me. I'll
lack
come over and kick your butt.
I know you will. That's why I don't want to say it. Yeah. Go ahead, Gary.
I was just going to say, I was fortunate, you know, that I could ride, or I was riding probably before I could walk. And that's in all honesty. And it was just something that I grew up with. So I was fortunate. And the other fortunate thing, I said that, you know, I had weight issues, but not horrible weight issues. My size was just right for what I needed to be strong and aggressive and finish and whatnot. But look, at the end of the day, with our scale of weights for Americans, with the way our food is now and everything, we're not making them as small as we used to. I don't think that is any. I don't think that's a wrong thing to say. We just are, as a human race here in America, we are bigger than what we used to be. So the opportunities for, you know, kids grow up and they're like, you know, I'm going to be too big to be a thoroughbred jockey or even a quarter horse jockey. And so we're seeing more and more of the top class riders, like Donna said, comes from Panama, Puerto Rico, and they are polished when they come. And it's great to see the competition is extensive. And now we've got French jockeys that have gone through their jockey school. And I think it's, I know I'm enjoying watching it as a fan now of the competition, especially on the East Coast, and a couple of the West Coast jocks that come out and are very, very competitive when they come, top riders, Flavian Prats and Julian Leperoux, Florent Giroux, and then of course the Ortiz brothers and Luis Saez. And yeah, I think, to me, Chris and Donna, you can both speak, but it's the most competitive jockey colonies that I've seen since the Pinkai, Cordero, Shoemaker, McCarron, Delahousie. You could go on and on.
Gary Stevens,
Georgie Velasquez, Jose Santos. Now, thanks, Donna, but it's fun to watch right now for me. I think covering Saratoga right now, I could go about 15 deep and not really care which jockey I got, which one was riding for me, as if I, you know, owning horses.
Chris, you brought up Bill Shoemaker in a different context a couple minutes ago, and he was known as a jockey with good hands. What exactly does that mean? You hear about it all the time. Oh, he's got great hands.
Yeah, most of your I would say all of your top jockeys have good hands, and what it really means is the physical aspect of your feel and your touch goes a long way with enabling you to communicate with the horse you're riding. You know, they have these horses have a bridle on with a bit in their mouth, and the one thing I tried to impress upon the students I had when I was teaching at the jockey school I started was that bit is probably already uncomfortable in the horse's mouth, at least to a degree. So what I tried to do was decrease any comfort that the horse may be experiencing having that piece of steel in its mouth. And so I would try to, handle my reins with kid gloves, if you will, when the occasion permitted. some horses are really, really strong, and they've got really tough mouths and really strong against the bridle. And so you have to incorporate a great deal of strength and leverage. Watching Bill Shoemaker for many years, when I was able to ride with him and against him, I noticed that he had that gift, that knack, that horses just appreciated them, having Bill on their back. I have lunch with a friend of mine here in Lexington quite often, and this guy's in his 80s, and he had the occasion to have dinner with Eddie Arcaro several times, and he asked Arcaro the question, what's the difference between you and Bill Shoemaker? He says, well, as far as I'm concerned, I have to make horses run. They just want to run for shoe. They just, he gets up there on their back, and he's very comfortable. And he was just amazing how much finesse. I guess the best word I can use for the hands is a great deal of finesse.
Yeah. Donna, Gary, your thoughts on hands?
I'll opine quickly. I think one of the things that my mother impressed upon me, and I remember her saying it as I was growing up, even if I wasn't at the time interested in becoming a jockey, was that one of the hardest things for a jockey to do is just to get out of the way, to not ride the horse, right? Because the horses are naturally competitive. They want to race. We do sometimes ask them to be patient, just wait a little bit longer. We're not going to go yet. You don't know how far the race is, but I do. But sometimes just getting out of the horse's way. And the only way you can get out of their way is if to have really good light hands. And oftentimes that's what it's meant when somebody says having light hands. It's just getting out of the way, letting the horse be the horse, giving them fewer things to think about because there's a lot going on for them already. And I think that's often, but some people also have said, well, women have lighter hands than men, and that's not true. I've seen women who are awfully heavy-handed, and then people like Pat Day and Bill Shoemaker who were very, very light-handed. And so it's not a gender thing. It's just a jockey's trait.
Yeah, Donna, I'll say Shu taught me so much as he did everyone. And Chris, not to bring it up, but I'm going to bring it up. His ride in the Classic on Ferdinand, it was a thing of beauty. He never really encouraged him until his final two strides. Ferdinand had a way of, he'd make the lead and want to pull up, and but his hands, soft hands. I heard that comment. And I was paid the compliment from Bill Shoemaker that I had great hands. It was fed back to me. And I'm like, what does that mean? Well, what it means, let's say we're riding an 1,100-pound horse and that horse wants to do something. I'm not going to win a battle of strength. So you figure out a way to get along with horses. Chris had said, to make them comfortable underneath you, make them the boss until it's time that you call on them to be your friend and help you. That was sort of my theory with tough fillies. Is I didn't just make them think that they were the boss. They were the boss, and I did whatever I could to please them and make them happy. Going to the starting gate, Beholder was one of them. Winning Colors was one of them. Serena's Song, as Donna wrote. Difficult fillies at times. They were temperamental. They were tough. They had a mind of their own. But if you could make them think they were the boss, when those starting gate doors opened up, they were jelly in my hands. They would do anything I requested. And I know that may be difficult to understand. I know Donna and Chris understand what I'm saying, but they became putty in my hands, and they would do anything and everything I wanted them to do. And our relationship grew throughout their career, and it helped me. I learned a lot from the horses that I rode, the difficult ones.
We are not by any means done. We're going to be back with your questions after the following from Blood Horse and our Q&A sponsor.
Blood Horse Plus, available through bloodhorse.com, provides exclusive, timely, and unmatched content to subscribers, including Fox Sports, Blood Horse branded weekly programs, a detailed stakes winners section, behind-the-scenes videos from Blood Horse staff, on-demand access to deeper horse statistics, and a $5 monthly credit to equineline.com. Upgrade to Blood Horse Plus today.
And we're back. I had to go talk to my sister who's watching on the radio on the patio. So Gary, what do we got from our audience?
All right, got some really good questions. Let's start off with this question. All right, are there certain types of horses, distances, surfaces, and trainers that jockeys prefer to ride? Or do jockeys believe they can ride any horse, any racing style, any distance for any trainer?
Well, I'll start with that real quick, just because people always ask you what's your favorite kind of horse to ride, turf, dirt, or whatever. And my first answer is always, I prefer to ride a horse who's racing over the surface that they prefer to be racing over. And I also prefer to ride a horse who's racing at their ideal distance. So riding a sprinter going 1 1/8 is no fun for anyone, including the horse, and vice versa. But, you know, for me, no. And I think you're going to find the same thing from Gary and from Chris. You just want to ride the horse over their preferred surface and their preferred distance, and run it and ride that horse in their preferred style. Figure out what that is. If they want to come from off the pace, if they want to go to the lead, if they want to stalk. Gary?
Don, I'll just add one thing to what you said. It's very, and in the proper class. When you've got a horse that's running out of their league, when they're running above their head, you can ruin a horse's career like that. They like running with their friends, and there is a class for all of them. It's the owners and trainers and jockeys that are fortunate enough to be able to ride, train, or own a grade 1 winner. Then you're very, very privileged, even to run at that class level. It's the top of the game. And listen, Donna will tell you, it doesn't really matter what you pay for these horses at auction or anything else. They are worth, at the end of the day, what they're worth ability wise. Sometimes we think they're better than what they are, and you've got to take the hit and make them happy and run them where they belong at the end of the day.
Okay. Next question. How often are trainers giving you specific instructions pre-race? And what happens if those instructions differ from your plans based on your own handicapping of the race? Maybe Chris, jump in on that.
Yeah, sure, Gary. Well, I would say for the trainers that I rode for early in my career, 100% of the trainers gave me instructions, because I was green, just learning and just, striving to prove myself. As I progressed in my career and got to ride better horses against better riders for better trainers, I would have to, listen to the instruction, try to understand precisely what the trainer would like me to do. I always went into the paddock with a plan in mind. I always had a game plan. I had not just plan A, but I also had plan B in case something untoward happened leaving the starting gate, which would change my plans in an instant. The trainers with whom I had a really good relationship, I could share with them in the paddock that, I'll give you an example. A trainer says to me, all right, listen, I want you to go to the lead, and I think we're the speed of the speed. And I would if I disagreed with that trainer, I would say, well, you know what? I went back and I looked at the replays of the other speed horses in the race. And those horses, when they were showing speed, they did it under their own accord. They did not have to be sent to show the kind of speed they were showing. I did a lot of homework with video. I used to love to watch races of the horses that I competed against, to try to find a weakness, to try to find a little bit of a hole in them somewhere. And if I knew that I was not on the quickest horse in the race, as far as going to the lead, I would share that with the trainer. I'd say, you know what, these two other horses in here, they're pulling their jocks to the lead. If you want me to go, I'm going to have to really use my horse. And at the same time, the other two horses are going to be making that early run on their own. So there were times when I would share that with the trainer in the paddock. There were some trainers with whom I couldn't share that because they felt like maybe I was contradicting their idea of how the race would be run. In those cases, I would play it by ear. I would do my best to try to follow the instruction, but in the end, I would use my own judgment. I always felt more confident in using my own judgment. I'll give you a quick example. Back in the late 90s, Ron Ellis claimed a filly called Tropical Stephanie from Charlie Whittingham. He was very brave to be claiming a horse off of Whittingham, because who's going to move a horse up over Charlie, right? And when I rode the filly for Charlie, she was way back on the grass at Del Mar. She came from the clouds and ran on to be third. And Ron claimed her out of that race and ran her back on the raise. And Ron happened to be out of town at the Keeneland sale that day. And his owner, Barbara Claus, came over to me and said, Ron just called and he would like you to keep the filly closer to the pace than you had her last time out. This time it was the race, a mile and eighth on the grass. And I said, well, could you explain a little bit more? And she said, yeah, Ron thinks you should be 5 or 6 lengths off the lead. I said, okay. And I started to walk away, and I turned around in jest. I said to her, does Ron want me 5 or 6 lengths off of a 49.5 or a 45.5? So she said, huh? Like that. I said, don't worry, Barbara. I think I know what he wants.
Yeah.
So,
they have that old bromide about instructions. Good jockeys don't need instructions. Bad jockeys don't listen to them.
Oh no, the bad jockeys cannot follow them.
Hey, Chris, what about our friend Gary Jones? Great trainer, trained some great thoroughbreds. Turkle Man, Chris rode many more for Gary Jones than I did, but I was fortunate enough to ride some really good ones. But Gary, he would give you plan A, plan B, plan C, make sure you warm them up really good, cuz just get them going, get them boom, boom, boom. And then right before you'd leave the paddock, he said, if all that fails, do what you want. And that was, Gary Jones. And those were great people for me to ride for. Richard Mandela, a few of those guys, they knew that I had a plan when I went out there. We'd read a race the same way. I liked as a jockey, when I was riding a horse for the first time, I didn't exactly want to be told how to ride the horse. I wanted to know any idiosyncrasies that horse had, whether he or she did not like being inside of horses, didn't like being in tight, didn't like to have too much hold taken off of it or scent, that sort of thing. No idiosyncrasies of the airplane I was getting ready to fly.
Yeah.
All right, next question. Yep. How much chatter or talk goes on in a race, and what are jockeys saying to each other? At least what you can repeat here.
Well, a few
not
times,
as much as people think.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Chris.
A few times we're going down the backside and Gary's on my outside, and I look over to him and I asked him if he's going to Molina Rojo tonight.
The old Seabiscuit.
Yeah. That of course.
Most of the chatter that there is out there is for safety purposes. Let's say I'm in a bad spot going into the 3/8 turn, and Chris has got me outrun a half a length, and I shouldn't be in there, but I can't get out. It's too late, and he's outrun. A horse is on the outside of him, outrunning him a neck. With the guy that's 3 wide, I'm in his blind spot. He doesn't know I'm in there, so I may say, "Hey, Chris, I'm in here." and Chris will let the guy on the outside know, hey, I got one in here, man, and he's in trouble. And that's about, I mean, that's the sort of situations. And if you're not getting that help on the outside, there's going to be some words back in the jocks room when it's all said and done. And you just hope you don't want to drop anyone. And I don't care who it is, horses, jockeys, whatever. We don't always all get along. That question was asked earlier, but at the end of the day, none of us want to see the other guy get hurt. He's got a family to go home, guys, girls, we got families to go home to. And we're all in the same business together. So it's sort of the honor a policy of we've got to police ourselves at times, and when it gets out of hand, and hopefully the stewards step in and do what's right with penalties and so forth.
Yeah, the quickest way to get yourself in trouble is to yell, "Move over, I'm coming through." That's the easiest way to get shut off. Oh, thanks for letting me know that you're there.
So Donna, maybe you can add to that. When you're on horseback during the races that are televised, and the races are over, we see jockeys high-fiving each other and talking to one another. Is it a lot of congratulatory things going on, or do they get a little bit ticked off at each other? What kind of dialogue's going on there?
Well, after the races, as you know, I'm out there for the Triple Crown races, the Breeders' Cup races, all the big races. And so those are major wins for the jockeys. So it doesn't matter if you're a Mike Smith who's won your 26th Breeders' Cup, or if you are, Luis Saez up and coming who's looking for your second Breeders' Cup win. At the end of the day, the guys are happy for you to have won a big race. At that level, sometimes the guy who just got beat that far is congratulating the guy who just won it because they were trying so hard to win it. They know how much it means. Right. But yeah, back to answering the question, there's not a lot of conversation that happens, just like Gary said. And the conversation that does happen would be after the race and just, congratulations or whatever. But oftentimes you'll see after the big races, the guys are genuinely happy for one of their fellow jockeys.
Okay, here's a good question. The PDJF, the Permanently Disabled Jockey Fund. Can you explain what that is to the audience, and if they wanted to participate with it, how they could do that?
Yeah,
Chris?
Sure. The Jockeys Guild some years ago established the Permanently Disabled Jockeys Fund in the aftermath of the Don Macbeth Memorial Jockey Fund closing the doors. And they do a great job raising money for individuals who, jockeys who were hurt, permanently disabled as a result of a racing or training accident. I can't remember the number off the top of my head, but there's something like 75 individuals who are either quadriplegic, paraplegic, or suffer from brain injury. The headquarters is in Chicago. It's in Elmhurst, Illinois. If anybody wants to, what the PDJF does is provide financial assistance to those individuals who are in dire need of that kind of support. And if anybody out there would like to make a contribution, you can do so by going to PDJF, Permanently Disabled Jockeys Fund, pdjf.org. And there's a link on there where you can make a contribution.
Okay, thank you, Chris. Okay, so here's a question. Who was your all-time favorite trainer to ride for?
Was that for me?
Anyone.
Oh, okay. Wow. Gary mentioned one. Gary Jones I had a great relationship with Gary, and he put me on runner after runner after runner. Ron McAnally, and I can't put it down to one, really. Ron McAnally, Charlie Whittingham supported my career the whole time I was out in Southern California, and they were just great horsemen and wonderful wonderful people as well. So I owe a debt of gratitude to all three of those gentlemen, but there are many others too.
Yeah, I think it depends on, oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Gary.
No, you go ahead, Donna. Go ahead.
Well, I think we would have favorites from wherever we started, like, right, wherever you first started and work your way up. But when I first started riding, I rode for Steve Asmussen, and he wasn't one of my favorite trainers to ride for because he's very volatile after a race and he has high expectations of what he wants from you. But I learned a lot from him. So that helped a lot. And so it was a real sort of stepping stone for me. But then ultimately, I would say that Wayne Lucas ended up being my favorite trainer to ride for. But having said all that, my husband, Frank Brothers, is sitting in this room right now as I speak. So if I don't say I loved riding for Frank Brothers, I could be in trouble. But the thing about Wayne, and Gary, I want you to talk about this, is when he would give you instructions, he would always say, I want you laying 1, 2, 3. He wanted his horses forwardly placed. And so if he said, I want this horse laying 1, 2, 3, 4, my first thought was, oh my God, he can't run at all. Like, I've got no shot. So anyway, but Wayne was always confident in his horses. He was always optimistic. He knew his horses well. So he told you about those nuances, those quirks that Gary alluded to, and he usually had good horses. Gary? You're muted, G.
No, I'm unmuted now, Donna. No, he's the king, Wayne Lucas, and I rode for so many great trainers. I'm with Chris. I cannot decipher any one person that I enjoyed riding for more than others. I rode for some true horsemen in a lot of different countries that taught me so much. But if it wasn't for Wayne Lucas, I wouldn't be sitting here doing this right now. Real quick story of Wayne had asked me to go and ride the Arkansas Derby on a horse named Tank's Prospect, and he said, I'm going to pick you up. Give me your address. I'll pick you up after the races and we'll head out. And he said, I got everything handled. Well, this big stretch limousine pulled up in front of the house, and Wayne showed up on the front step, 5th Avenue in Arcadia, the first house I'd bought. He's got on the green V-neck sweater with the WL on it, and get in the limo, and we drive down Ontario Airport. And I'm like, I've been to Ontario Airport, but I've never entered this way. We drove to the back, and a gate opened up, and there was a Learjet parked out on the tarmac with the WL on the back of it. And it was all catered. He had a bed made for me. And he said, you like traveling like this? We landed in Oklahoma to refuel before we got into Hot Springs. I said, yeah, this is all right. And he said, if you win today, get used to it. And that was the start of a long relationship over a lot of years, and gave me my final Triple Crown win with Oxbow in 2013. So if I've got to pick a favorite, it's gonna be the king, Wayne Lucas.
All right. Okay, Tom, I think we're going to wrap up with this last question that just came in. Can you explain your thoughts on the benefits and the drawbacks of the various whip rules and the approaches balancing safety, horsemanship, and competitive ability?
Who wants to touch that?
Touchy subject, that's for sure. Well, I'll jump in. Without question, New Jersey took it way too far. There's a happy medium to be met here, to be reached. I'm all for limiting the number of strikes that a jockey applies to a horse. I'm all for strict making the whip rules more strict than they have been in the past. But a lot of racing jurisdictions are making good strides towards that end. As I said, I think New Jersey took it way too far, and I personally used my riding crop for encouragement, I would say 98% of the time, and the other 2% for safety. Well, if I'm riding in New Jersey and I all of a sudden I'm on a horse that is going to be included in that 2%. Well, I sure as heck want to be able to, use the riding crop to get his attention, so that he's not going to do anything that's going to drop somebody or drop myself. So I definitely believe that the riding crop is necessary to carry and use judiciously. I wish it didn't get this far. I wish that over the years, the stewards had become more strict with riders that are hammering on horses down through the stretch when they're hopelessly beaten. You got to ride hard to get first, second, and third, and fourth. There's all kinds of exotic wagers. We have a responsibility to the betting public to get the most out of our horse, to get the best placing. But those horses that are not getting anything, when the riders come down there hammering on them, I just think they should be reprimanded or even sanctioned if it's a continual thing that they do.
I'm in agreement 100% with Chris. Well said. And in all honesty, I wish we could have started policing ourselves. Give us the right to see these the abuse that was going on back behind, because it's horses that were hopelessly beaten, and now it's been taken to a whole nother step. And one thing that should be said, they said we can use it for, or jockeys can use it for safety matters. Well, part of being a great jockey is sensing things before they happen. We know what you're seeing on camera, you're not feeling. When a horse's ears twitch up like this and he throws his head, man, you need something to get his attention. And the stewards are going to say, well, you use the whip unwarrantedly. You didn't need that. It didn't look like you were in trouble. Well, you weren't feeling what I was feeling. So that opens up a whole nother can of worms. What they did in New Jersey and with Chris, it's overstepped the boundaries, but that's just my simple opinion.
The only thing I'm going to add to that, because I think it was all well said, is that the thing that the general public doesn't understand if they've never ridden horses, two things. Number one, we race horses at all types of distances. So they might race 3/4 of a mile 1 week and then 1 1/16 miles 3 weeks later. They don't know where the wire is in spite of the fact that we all know where it is. So they don't know when the finish is coming up. And so that riding crop helps us to encourage them at the end so that they know that the end is coming near. Here, the finish line is coming. And the other thing is that they're herd animals, right? So they want to stay in their herd. And so sometimes they need to be incentivized to pull away from that herd. And if you can do it in a way where you're just encouraging a horse, then I think that should be allowed. But I agree with the guys on the other things or points they made.
Very good. All right, thanks, Donna. We're going to wrap it up here. And if I can just add to this conversation, at least I hope they get together so that the rules are the same everywhere. That's something that we hope can happen in the near future. So that does it for today. We want to thank you guys. Are great. You guys are always great. I have the greatest amount of admiration for you guys, not only as jockeys and what you do, but as people and as great ambassadors for the sport. You guys are terrific, and you're terrific every time. Thanks to our sponsors, Starlight Racing, the Green Group, and Airdrie Stud. And thanks to our owners. Without our owners, there is no game. And thanks to all of our viewers today for taking time out. I hope you enjoyed our banter back and forth, and hope to see you next month. Our panel includes racing clubs, and we'll hope that you can join us on September 7th. Till then, thank you very much. Enjoyed it. Great. Thanks, guys.